Hey guys, welcome. We're talking BlackBerry today, the old school phone manufacturer that got pushed out of the market by Apple. Android died a slow death, and now they're actually staging a comeback as a software company. So I want to dive into this one. I want to give you the whole story on BlackBerry. Now, this was actually a request by somebody on my Patreon. There's actually a community of folks that I'm trying to build here, and we hang out on Discord. We talk about stocks and stock market investing and strategies and all that kind of thing. I reveal my investment portfolio on my Patreon. So you can sort of watch over my shoulder and you can see all the details about what I'm buying and selling and my thoughts behind those moves, rebalancing and all that kind of thing. And I also post a lot of investment ideas on there. I have a unique approach to picking US-based penny stocks, and I post the top 20 picks from that screener online every week. It's a fantastic source of new ideas. So please check that out. I'll put a link down in the description. Now, this is going to be a slightly longer video. There's a rich and complicated story behind BlackBerry and what they're currently up to, both in terms of the turnaround that they're executing and the technology that they have in the products. There's a lot of depth, I think, to their current products and what they're actually going to get up to in the future. So I want to do a bull and a bear case. I've got 4 key points on each side that I want to tell you about. So why it's a good opportunity, why it might not be such a good opportunity. And at the end, I'll give you my synopsis on which case I think is stronger. And on this particular video, I want to go one step further and actually recommend a little bit of a trading strategy for BlackBerry that I think makes sense given the current situation that they're in. So please stick around till the end of the video for that. And let's get into it. So, of course, BlackBerry is a turnaround story, right? If you're at all familiar with the history of this company, at one time they were pretty much the top of the heap in terms of phone manufacturers. Everybody loved their BlackBerry devices. And then they died a slow death as the competitors actually come out and crushed them with better devices and better offerings and stole market share. Now, they didn't completely die, though. They certainly could have, but they sort of, rallied their forces and are trying now to execute a turnaround to get out of the hardware and device manufacturing business and get into the software as a service business with a key focus on cybersecurity and the Internet of Things. And I think so far they're actually making some inroads in terms of that turnaround story. There's a timeline there that started in 2015. They brought in a guy named John Chen, actually back in 2013. Who's a bit of a key turnaround expert, and I want to get into more details there about why he is so important. But basically, they've been marching towards this development of these secure platforms for connected vehicles and other applications into the future. They have a key product here with QNX. I'm going to get into what that is and why it's important in this turnaround strategy for specifically IoT and connected vehicle platforms, and also where they're going, in current day and into the future. With some of these key capabilities like AI and machine learning and some of the key security capabilities that they're delivering into the future. They have a number of different products now that are focused on this particular space. So I want to go into each of these and explain what they're doing, why these are key technologies and key products, and the opportunity that each one presents to the business, because that's really the basis of the investment opportunity here. It's heavily rooted in the technology. Now, in terms of what's been happening recently with BlackBerry, there was a lot of pretty crazy price action around the first part of the year. A couple of reasons for that. One is that they announced a strategic partnership with AWS to develop a connected vehicle ecosystem. They're calling this Ivy. And so, a lot of companies will say, hey, we have a partnership with AWS, and all it means is they're hosting their stuff in the Amazon cloud. That is not this. This is actually a key partnership working in tandem with Amazon to build out this cloud-based ecosystem that they're calling Ivy. I'll get into the details of what that is and what its prospects for the future are. But it really is a key announcement. I think the market recognized that in January. The price shot up. At the same time, BlackBerry became a little bit of a meme stock, and it caught some of the same tailwind that was happening in terms of the craziness with GME GameStop and AMC. And so, it got a lot of that irrational exuberance in terms of the price run up. That excitement has subsided. And at the same time, there was a rather bad earnings report in the last quarter. And so that really drove that downwards price action that we saw over the last little while. And that sort of brings us to current day for BlackBerry. So it's been a crazy ride over the last few weeks. And I think now we need to take stock of where we are and see if now is the time to get into the stock. And so really we have to look at the investment thesis now at this point in time. And so I think that based on what has happened in terms of the recent price action, the investment thesis on this one is a contrarian value play, right? So there's a lot of bears that have forced the price of BlackBerry down to where it is today. There's a lot of disappointment associated with the recent earnings report. I'll get into some of that. And so really the price has perhaps been driven down low enough that this is an attractive entry point, or is it? So that's what we really have to take a look at, right? Is this a contrarian value play that makes sense based on the current time frame? Let's take a look at the bear and bull cases.
What's the upside potential?
Yeah, so the first point in the bull case, I think, has to be the leadership that John Chen brings to this company. Now, John Chen is a little bit of a turnaround expert. Back in 1998, he executed a very successful turnaround at a company called Sybase. I was just starting my IT career back in the 98 timeframe, and I was actually a little bit of a Sybase DBA. I loved the product, but just like BlackBerry, it sort of got crushed by the competition. Oracle and Microsoft were squeezing the market for Sybase on both sides, and eventually the company just ran into the ground and they were at basically end of life at that point. John Chen came in and he rallied the troops. He got the core engineering team together, the core intellectual property and the patents that they had, and he said, hey, no, there's something here. We can actually turn this company into something. And so over the next few years, he did exactly that. He turned Sybase around. He made it a very attractive target for a little company called SAP. There was a merger between Sybase and SAP, and the core Sybase technology became the database underneath SAP, which is a massively successful company today. So not that John Chen can be credited with all of that, certainly, but it really was his leadership that took Sybase from basically the edge of the cliff to the point where they could execute that successful merger. So, the fact that he's done this previously in a very, very similar set of circumstances tells me that there's a really, really good chance he can do the exact same thing for BlackBerry. A couple other points about John. He's only 65 years old. I think this guy has a lot of years ahead of him in terms of his career. And if you go back to the early days of his career, he started out as an engineer, a systems engineer at Unisys, and he has developed and gained deep technical expertise throughout his entire career, right? So he's not just a generic business executive in charge of technology companies. He is a guy that came up through the ranks as an engineer. He can understand systems engineering, at that top level of the company. And that's absolutely what BlackBerry needs. They are a highly specific technology company, and they need that technical leadership that a guy like John Chen can provide. And, that is so important to a business like BlackBerry. In my career, I've often seen a tug of war basically between the engineering folks at a technology company and the business leadership at that same company. Often the two groups don't know what each other is up to, and they're pulling the company in different directions. When you can avoid that problem and get alignment between what the engineers are doing and between what the salespeople, the business folks are doing, and get everybody on the same page, get them all marching towards the same goal, that is super powerful. And I have a lot of confidence that this guy can do exactly that. Point number two here is the broad market opportunity, right? So they're chasing two very broad markets here. One is the Internet of Things, and the other is EVs, or more broadly speaking, the autonomous connected vehicle market. So the first one of those, Internet of Things, for those that don't know, it's basically the idea of taking small independent devices and connecting them to the network so that they can become smart devices, right? So you can actually connect to them, you can gather data from them, you can make decisions based on that data, and then you can control those devices to change their behavior. That's basically the Internet of Things. It has a lot of different applications in terms of industrial automation and health and autonomous driving in vehicles, which is the one that BlackBerry is very specifically chasing with some of these applications that they're developing. So I think it's a really, really great fit. Where BlackBerry is coming in is the security side of both of those market opportunities. And both of those markets demand highly secure solutions, right? So you cannot have your autonomous vehicle hacked. You can't have the operating system that runs it crashing all the time. That just doesn't work. And the same is true for some of those other applications, industrial automation and healthcare. You also can't have hacking and crashing in those markets. And so there's a really, really strong market opportunity and market demand for security built into these systems from the ground up, not as an afterthought. And that is the problem today with cybersecurity in these big operating systems like Linux and Windows and the like. Security is a constant war of patching and fixing these systems. And really, there's a broad acknowledgement in cybersecurity industry today that the way forward is not that. The way forward is to build a highly secure system from the ground up with security as a core architecture principle instead of something that you layer on top. Layering it on top just doesn't work. And so BlackBerry is coming at this saying, no, we have a connected car solution that has built with security from day one. And in terms of that market advantage, they actually have managed to penetrate that market, and they have a first mover advantage with their QNX product. It's actually in a lot of cars today. And I think it's now given them enough of a lead that they're actually going to be somewhat difficult to unseat if a competitor wanted to come along and squeeze them out of that market. So not only is there a good market opportunity, but they've demonstrated that they can make significant inroads into that market. So now the next challenge is to align their sales growth and drive their revenue growth from the same drivers that we're going to see in that EV market over the next few years. And finally, the other point I'll make about their market penetration is this strategic partnership they've announced with Baidu. Through Baidu, they are going to be able to penetrate the Chinese EV market and actually get their connected car products into that particular market and really leapfrog ahead of some of the folks that are only playing in the domestic North American market. There's already some evidence that they've done this with XPeng, and there's rumors that they may be able to do it with NIO. If they can, I think this is a really bullish situation or indicator for BlackBerry. I really think that the recent price action is bullish. I believe in the idea that this is a contrarian play. I think that the sell-off is potentially a little bit overdone. I'm not entirely convinced it's over, right? But I do feel as though this heavy sell-off has created a buying opportunity for BlackBerry. And I also feel as though the meme stock price action is over. I think that the weak hands that bought at the top and drove that unreasonable run-up in price have, for the most part, sold out by this point. And I think the disappointment is nearing the bottom, and that is possibly presenting a golden opportunity to buy this stock, especially if it were to drift just a little bit lower than what it's at today as I record this video. Okay, so here's the big one, is the technology. This is what really impresses me about BlackBerry, and I think it's the strongest point in favor of the bull case. QNX is an embedded operating system that, like I was indicating earlier, is built with security from the ground up. The reason is that QNX is what's called a microkernel operating system. So if we think about the operating systems that we typically use in our desktops and laptops and things like that, those are monolithic operating systems. And what that means is that when you run an application or a service on those operating systems, it sort of runs within the same memory space and execution space as the operating system itself. That means if those applications have a problem, either a bug or a defect or a security flaw, you're potentially introducing that same flaw to the entire operating system and to all the other applications that are running in that operating system. That means that a bad application or a bad piece of code can crash the entire thing or introduce a security flaw into some other piece of application or data. That's how the vast majority of hacks and exploits happen today, is a hacker squeezes his way in through a flaw in one little application, and then the whole system is done. QNX basically solves that problem by using what's called a microkernel operating system, which sort of pulls back the core operating system functions to its own isolated space, and applications run very separately. The idea being that if one particular application goes bad or introduces a flaw, it cannot compromise the core operating system and other applications are safe. So it's a key architectural principle that contains the damage from a potential hack or exploit or bad code or whatever it is. And that is so key and so important in any application where you cannot have hacks, crashes, reboots, and all that kind of thing. Imagine if your autonomous driving car in the middle of the freeway suddenly gets a blue screen of death and the operating system crashes. That's a non-starter right from the beginning, and that's the problem that QNX is designed to avoid right from the get-go. Another key point about QNX is that it runs in what's called a microservice architecture. And so application developers can come into an OS like QNX. They can develop these key microservices for very, very small specific applications, like controlling a brake sensor or reading a LiDAR sensor in a car or something like that. And those microservices can be easily scaled. It's incredibly easy then to read data from them. And it makes the entire architecture of building a connected car so much easier for an application developer that doesn't have to struggle with a monolithic operating system environment. Now, the next product up here is something called Ivy, and it's actually more of a platform than a product. And this was the key announcement that they made with AWS, is this development of Ivy as a connected car platform in the cloud, obviously on Amazon's cloud in AWS. And so this is really the core thing that is going to enable data gathering from the cars, get it into the cloud, and then enable rapid application development on top of Ivy to deliver all kinds of things, right? So, the things they're picturing here. Infotainment is obviously the big application development use case current day, but going into the future, when we hit L5 autonomous driving, we're going to get into connected car communication with the other cars on the road. We're going to get into communication with sensors within the city, within the roadway. The opportunities for expansion of that microservice architecture from QNX out to the rest of the ecosystem is huge. And potentially, if BlackBerry can really become embedded in the connected car ecosystem, they can own a large part of that application development and hopefully monetize that go forward. So it's potentially a massive opportunity for these guys. Now, there's a few other products here. Spark is an interesting one. Spark is what's called a unified endpoint management system. And basically, it's a control system that will secure all of these individual devices on the Internet of Things network and allow you to securely manage them, to disable access if you detect a security fault or whatever it is. This is sort of a bread and butter application. There's lots of UEM solutions out there. Most of them, though, are focused on the PC computing market, the enterprise space, This particular one, though, is well positioned to do the same thing for the Internet of Things landscape and actually provide device security for all these little sensors and things like that that are going to be out there in the car. So I think this is something that the market is missing. I think, Spark is potentially going to be a really, really key product piece for an overall suite that BlackBerry may be able to build into the future. As of right now, it's not all that exciting, but I think it has a lot of potential. The last two here are AtHoc and SecuSuite. These are more plain vanilla products. They're not all that exciting. I think that BlackBerry has developed them because they're easy wins based on the legacy library of patents and intellectual property that they had. These are relatively easy products for them to develop and to sell into niche markets that need secure voice communications and critical event management within the infrastructure. I think it makes sense for them to do this, and maybe these products can play a role in a broader suite, again, that BlackBerry can develop into the future. Maybe they can be key players in that Ivy ecosystem that they want to develop. As of right now, they're not all that exciting, but keep an eye on those products for the future. I do think they have potential to drive additional revenue.
Let's talk about risk.
Okay, so let's look at the bad news. First up, we have to look at that Q4 earnings report out of 2020. It was a complete disaster. I think the bad news like that could continue. Now, if you look at what happened in that earnings report, they absolutely missed on earnings. They missed on guidance on revenue, which I think the market was actually a little bit more upset about than anything. And really the explanation from the CEO is, look, we are in negotiations to sell our licensing business, which is based a lot on their core legacy patents, so that we can focus on our real business go forward, right? Our real strategic business. And while we're talking to potential buyers for that licensing business on the patent library, we have suspended monetization activities on that patent library. Now, I question that one a little bit, right? Is it really necessary? And why was it necessary to stop monetizing those things while you're negotiating and talking? Maybe there's a good reason for that. I don't really know what it is. And, in the back of my mind, I'm a little bit concerned that they're inflating that to really cover for an underlying problem in the business that really prevented them from recognizing that revenue. You really do have to worry about that. The other thing that I'm worried about in terms of the sales sale of that licensing business is that the market will be disappointed in the eventual price that they're able to fetch for spinning off that particular business, right? Normally spinning off a legacy piece of business is good. I'm just really worried that any buyer is going to recognize that BlackBerry is in a bit of a crunch here, and they're potentially going to get a really, really good deal for that particular licensing business, and the market will see that, and the market will be disappointed. So I think there's probably more potential for a downward price catalyst when that news actually hits the market than anything else, and I'm sort of braced for impact on that particular piece of bad news. I always like to look at the competitive moat that a company has, and when I look at it for BlackBerry, I'm a little bit unimpressed. I think there is a moat forming around QNX due to that first mover advantage, right? They're out there in a lot of cars, and that's great. I don't think anybody is coming close yet in terms of the competitive advantage for QNX. That said, I don't know how difficult it would be to unseat QNX. There are other microkernel operating systems out there. QNX is not unique, and I think somebody with deep pockets could even develop one from scratch. I think we have to ask ourselves, what is Apple doing in their secret laboratories, with respect to Apple Car? Are they developing a system on a chip like M1 that could potentially drive the same sort of solution that BlackBerry has here? I think that's absolutely possible. And I think there's other players like Google that could potentially unseat BlackBerry in that QNX business. Outside of BlackBerry's core products, you look at Ad Hoc and SecuSuite and stuff like that, those have no competitive moat whatsoever. There's a ton of products that do the exact same thing. And so really there's no moat there at all. Ivy is a completely new product. It's not there yet, so there's no moat there. So there's only this thin moat around QNX, and I wish it was a lot wider. The revenue model here in terms of monetization is not at all clear. When I look at the long-term growth picture, there's a lot of language here around future and opportunity and all this kind of thing. It's very, very fuzzy. I really have to wonder how long are we going to have to wait to get clarity here. In terms of QNX, really, I want to see that the growth in QNX is being recognized. I want to see that it's in line with the massive growth that we're going to see in the EV market. There's zero evidence of that today, and I think the market is looking for that confidence. I know that I am. And Ivy is too far out into the future, right? We don't even really know what the revenue model is for Ivy, let alone what it'll actually drive in terms of solid numbers. We don't know that either. And so I think there's so much uncertainty around both the revenue model and the amount of revenue they can drive into the future that is really, really hard to value the company currently. Yeah, and so the last point here really gets into Ivy and the broader competition around this future opportunity for a connected car ecosystem. For some reason, BlackBerry claims that there is no competition to Ivy. That is not true to my mind. Google has been chosen to be Ford's cloud provider out into 2023. I think they are going to do exactly what Ivy is trying to do with respect to building out this connected car ecosystem. Google is in a massively advantaged position to do this with Waymo. They already have a ton of data. They're already further ahead in terms of vertically integrating, their autonomous car driving business. I think their ability to drive additional application development on top of a Google Cloud platform is massive, and it's only been better enabled with this partnership through Ford. So when I compare the potential opportunity that Ivy presents versus what Google is capable of doing with Ford, I'm really, really concerned for BlackBerry that Google and Ford are going to roll in here and eat their lunch. And yeah, you can say that Android is not as good as QNX at security, but you know what? It might be good enough, especially in the next couple of years until we can get to full L5 autonomous driving. And by that time, Google could maybe solve that problem in some other way. So, that's always the struggle, right? You build something that is absolutely rock solid, and somebody else comes around with an 80% solution that's a little bit quicker, has deeper pockets, and actually blows right past you. I think there's potential for Android to do exactly that to QNX if BlackBerry's not careful. Okay, let's try to wrap this one up. So, the bull case is absolutely based on two things. It's based on the technology, which I am super impressed with. I've worked in IT for over 2 decades, and I love the BlackBerry story, what they're doing in terms of this technological turnaround. I'm also excited by the capability that I think John Chen brings to the company. I have a lot of confidence that he can actually execute that turnaround story. So both those things, to my mind, make the bull case for BlackBerry really, really strong. The bear case, on the other hand, though, is based on a couple of things. It's based on competition. position. I see deep pockets in Google and who knows what Apple is up to. I see both those guys actually coming for BlackBerry. Those are not companies you want in a competitive space. So I think that really strengthens the bear case over there. And really the other thing is I'm not impressed by BlackBerry's lack of proven ability to drive sales and actually execute on growth. There's a lot of uncertainty there that has yet to be proven out, and that strengthens the bear case as well. So this one is kind of a tough one to call, and the reason is that I think that the bullish prospects for BlackBerry are strong in the longer term, right? So a year from now, when we see some details on Ivy, and if we see some key partners sign into Ivy, that will massively strengthen the bull case on the technology side, but that's not happening just yet. And I think there's potential for more bad news over the next year to 2 years that have the potential to cause the stock price to either drift sideways or a little bit down from here. And so that makes me reluctant to buy right now. Now, if we can see some good news and we can see some evidence of positive price catalysts in the next few quarters, then I would be way more willing to take a position on this stock than I am today. Now, that said, I think if I were to take a position in BlackBerry, I would probably do it by selling puts. I love selling puts against stocks that I like. It allows me to collect premium while I wait for the stock to reach a milestone or experience a positive price catalyst. Or, the price will drop down below my strike price on the put, and I'll actually buy the stock at a discount. That's a good scenario as well. And so given that I probably think the most likely scenario for BlackBerry is either this sideways trending price action or possibly a drift down lower, I think I could actually make some money by selling premium through puts on BlackBerry over the next few quarters and maybe be perfectly happy if I was assigned. So I think that's a really good strategy and probably a good way to play this one given the time frame that we're in right now. So guys, that's it. That's my recommendation. I hope it helps. Please, if it did, throw the video a like. That absolutely helps me out. Don't forget to subscribe, ring the bell, and I'll see you in the next one.